Okay, we're going to continue to read with Noah and the book by Alexander Maclaren of David's life through the Psalms, I guess. So we're in the 8th chapter, the exile continued. And have Noah read for us first. Go ahead.
As our purpose in this volume is not a complete biography, it will not be necessary to dwell on the subsequent portions of the exile, inasmuch as there is little reference to these in the Psalms. We must pass over even that exquisite episode of Abigail, whose graceful presence and most subtle flow of silver-paced counsel soothed David's ruffled spirit, and led him captive at once as in a silken leash. The glimpse of old-world ways in the story, the rough mirth of the shearers, the hint of the kind of blackmail by which David's little force was provided, the snarling humor and garrulous crustiness of Nabal, David's fierce blaze of hot wrath, the tribute of the shepherds to the kindness and honor of the outlaws, the rustic procession, with the gracious lady last of all, the stately courtesy of the meeting, courtesy of the meeting, her calm, wise words, not flattery, yet full of predictions of prosperity most pleasant to her from such lips, not rebuke, yet setting in the strongest light how unworthy of God's anointed personal vengeance was, not servile, but yet recognizing the delicate touches his absolute power yet recognizing in delicate touches his absolute power over her, not object, and yet full of supplication. The quick response of David's frank nature and susceptible heart, which sweeps away all his wrath, and budding germ of love, which makes him break into benedictions on her in her wisdom, and thankfulness that he had been kept back from hurting thee, and the dramatic close in their happy union, all make up one of the most charming and of the many wonderful ideals of Scripture, all fragrant with the breath of love, and fresh with undying youth. The story lives, alas! How much longer do words endure than the poor earthly affections which they record? Real quick, I'm going to put this away.
Okay. Thank you for the tea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
After a second betrayal by the men of Ziph and a second meeting with Saul, their last, in which the doomed man parts from him with blessing...
Doomed
man parts from him with blessing and predictions of victory on his unwilling lips, David seems to have been driven to desperation by his endless skulking in dens and caves, and to have seen no hope of continuing much longer to maintain himself on the frontier and to elude Saul's vigilance. Possibly others than Nabal grudged to pay him for the volunteer police, which he kept up on behalf of the pastoral districts exposed to the wild desert tribes. At all events, he once more made a plunge into Philistine territory and offers himself and his men to the service of the king of Gath. On the offer being accepted, the little town of Ziklag was allotted to them, and became their home for a year and 4 months. To this period of comparative security, one psalm has been supposed to belong, the 31st, I believe. 31st Psalm?
Okay.
Which, do you want to read it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I would like to read it. Psalm 31st. Psalm 31st. For the director of music, a Psalm David. In you, O Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me. Come quickly to my rescue. Be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name, lead and guide me. Free me from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge. Into your hands I commit my spirit. Redeem me, O Lord, the God of truth. I hate those who cling to worthless idols. I trust in the Lord. I'll be glad and rejoice in your love, for you saw my affliction and knew the anguish of my soul. You have not handed me over to the enemy, but I have set my feet in a spacious place. Be merciful to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eyes grew weak with sorrow, my soul and my body with grief. My life is consumed by anguish, and my years by groaning. My strength fails because my affliction, and my bones grew weak because of all my enemies. I'm the unto contempt of my neighbors. I'm a dread to my friends. Those who see me on the street flee from me. I'm forgotten by them. And though I were dead, I'll become like a broken pottery. For I hear the slander many. There's terror on every side. They conspire against me and plot to take my life. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hands. Deliver me from my enemies and from those who pursue me. Let your face shine on your servant to save me in your unfailing love. Let me not be put to shame, O Lord, for I have cried out to you. But let the wicked be put to shame and lie silent in the grave. Let their lying lips be silenced, for with pride and contempt they speak arrogantly against the righteous. How great is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, which you bestowed in the sight of men, and those who take refuge in you. In the shelter of your presence you hide them from the intrigues of men. In your dwelling you keep them safe from accusing tongues. Praise be to the Lord, for he showed his wonderful love to me. When I was in the besieged city, in my alarm said, I'm cut off from your sight. Yet you heard my cry for mercy when I called to you for help. Love the Lord, all his saints. The Lord preserves the faithful, but the proud he pays back in full. Be strong and take heart, all you who hope in the Lord. Hallelujah. What a mighty song. Yeah, go ahead.
The 31st Psalm, which in tone and in certain expressions corresponds very well with the circumstances. There are many similarities in it with the others of the same period which we have already considered, such, for instance, as the figure of God, his rock, verse 3, the net which his enemies have laid for him, verse 4, the allusions to their calumnies and slanders, verse 13 and 18, his safe concealment in God, verse 20, and the close verbal resemblance of verse 24 with the closing words of Psalm, that would be 27. The reference, however, which has been taken as pointing to David's position in Ziklag, is that contained in the somewhat remarkable words, verse 21. Blessed be the Lord, for he hath showed me his marvelous loving kindness in a strong city. Of course, the expression may be purely a graphic figure for the walls and defenses of the divine protection, as, indeed, it is usually understood to be. But the general idea of the encompassing shelter of God has just been set forth in the magnificent imagery of the previous verse as the tabernacle, the secret of his presence in which he hides and guards his servants. And the further language of the phrase in question, introduced as it is by a rapturous burst of blessing and praise, seems so emphatic and peculiar as to make not unnatural the supposition of a historical basis in some event which had recently happened to the psalmist. No period of the life will so well correspond to such a requirement as the 16 months of his stay in Ziklag, during which he was completely free from fear of Saul, and stood high in favor with the king of Gath, in whose territory he had found a refuge. We may well believe that to the hunted exile, so long accustomed to a life of constant alarms and hurried flight, the quiet of a settled home was very sweet, and that behind the rude fortifications of the little town in the southern wilderness there seemed security, which made a wonderful contrast to their defenseless lairs and lurking places among the rocks. Their eyes would lose their watchful restlessness, and it would be possible to lay aside their weapons, to gather their households about them, and, though they were in a foreign land, still to feel something of the bliss of peaceful habitudes and tranquil use, and want healing their broken lives. No wonder, then, that such thankful praise should break from the leader's lips. No wonder that he should regard this abode in a fortified city as the result of a miracle of divine mercy. He describes the tremulous despondency which had preceded this marvel of loving kindness in language which at once recalls the wave of hopelessness which swept across his soul after his final interview with Saul, and which led to his flight into Philistine territory. And David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. 1 Samuel 27. How completely this corresponds with the psalm, allowance being made for the difference between poetry and prose, when he describes the thoughts which had shaded his soul just before the happy peace of the strong city. I said in my haste, I am cut off from before thine eyes. Nevertheless, thou heardest the voice of my supplication. Verse 22. And rising, as was ever his manner, from his own individual experience to the great truths concerning God's care of his children, the discovery of which was to him even more precious than his personal safety, he breaks forth in jubilant invocation, which, as always, is full of his consciousness that his life and his story belong to the whole household of God. Verse 23, O love Jehovah, all ye beloved of him. The faithful doth Jehovah preserve, and plentifully repayeth the proud doer. Verse 24, Courage, and let your heart be strong, all ye that wait for Jehovah. You want me to read the footnote?
No.
Okay. The glow of personal attachment to Jehovah, which kindless in the trustful words
Those
of
candles.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was
Okay.
weird. Which kindles in the trustful words is eminently characteristic. It anticipates the final teaching of the New Testament in bringing all the relations between God and the devout soul down to the one bond of love. We love him because he first loved us, says John. And David has the same discernment that the basis of all must be the outgoing of love from the heart of God, and that the only response which that seeking love requires is the awaking of the echo of its own divine voice in our ears.
In our hearts.
Our hearts, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Love begets love. Love seeks love. Love rests in love. Our faith corresponds to his faithfulness, our obedience to his command, our reverence to his majesty. But our love resembles his, from which it draws its life. So the one exhortation is love the Lord, and the ground of it lies in that name, his beloved, those to whom he shows his loving kindness. Verse 21. The closing words remind us of the last verse of Psalm 27. They are distinctly quoted from it, with the variation that the heartening to courage was addressed to his own soul. And here to all who wait on the Lord. The resemblance confirms the reference of both psalms to the same epoch, while the difference suits the change in his circumstances from a period of comparative danger, such as his stay in Adullam, to one of greater security, like his residence in Ziklag. The same persons who were called to love the Lord because they were a participant of his loving kindness are now called to courage and manly firmness of soul because their hope is fixed on Jehovah. The progress of thought is significant and obvious. Love to God, resting on consciousness of his love to us, is the true armor. There is no fear in love. The heart filled with it is strong to resist the pressure of outward disasters, while the empty heart is crushed like a deserted hulk by the grinding collision of the icebergs that drift rudderless on the wild wintry sea of life. Love, too, is the condition of hope. The patience and expectation of the latter must come from the present fruition of the sweetness of the former. Of these fair sisters, love is the elder as the greater. It is she who bears in her hands the rich metal from which hope forges her anchor, and the strong cords that hold it. Her experience supplies all the colors with which her sister paints the dim distance, and she it is who makes the other bold to be sure of the future, and clear-sighted to see the things that are not as though they were. To love the Lord is the path, and the only path, to hoping in the Lord. So had the psalmist found it for himself. In his changeful, perilous years of exile, he had learned that the brightness with which hope glowed on his lonely path depended not on the accident of greater or less external security, but on the energy of the clear flame of love in his heart. Not in vain had his trials been to him, which cast that rich treasure to his feet from their stormy waves. Not in vain will ours be to us, if we learn the lesson which he here would divide with all those that wait on the Lord.
I can continue reading the rest. Our limits prevent the further examination. The remaining psalms this period is the less necessary inasmuch as those which have been already considered fairly represent the whole. The 6th, 8th, the 17th, 22nd, 25th, and what is that one?
It's going to be the
64th? I think so.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
May, with varying probability, be considered as belonging to the Solim persecution. To this list, some critic would add as 40th and
49th, maybe, I'm not sure.
14. Okay. 40th.
It is 40th, yeah.
And 45th, 44th,
64th, I think.
Oh yes, 64th. I'm sorry. This Roman.
No, 69th. That's 69th. I'm sorry.
This Roman words is so confusing. I'm sorry. 69th. Okay. but on very uncertain grounds. But if we exclude them, the others have a strong family likeness, not only with each other, but with those which are being presented to the reader. The imagery of the wilderness, which has become so familiar to us, continually reappears. The prowling wild beasts, the nets, the snares, the hunted summits like a tamed bird among the hills, the protestation of innocence, the passionate invocation of retribution on the wicked, the confidence their own devices would come down on their heads, the intense yearning of a soul after God, are all repeated in those songs. Single metaphors and peculiar phrases which we have already met with record, as for instance, the shadow of thy wings, and the singular phrase rendered in our version shows thy marvelous loving kindness, which is found only here. In one of these psalms there seems to be a reference to his earliest days and the court, and to the depth of love and sympathy with Saul's darkened spirit, which he learned to cherish as he stood before him to soothe him with the ordered harmonies of harp and voice. The words are so definite that they appear to refer to some historic occasion. And as for me, in their sickness, my clothing was sackcloth. With a fasting, I humbled my soul, and my prayer into my own bosom returned. So truly did he feel for him, who is now his foe. The outward marks of mourning became the natural expression of his feelings. Such is plainly the meaning of the two former clauses as well as the following words. As a whole is a description of the hour signs grave, which seems better to understand the last of these three clauses as a picture of the bent hand sunk on the bosom, even while he prayed, than to break the connection by referring it either to the requital of hate for his sympathy or to the purity of his prayer, which was such that he could desire nothing more for himself. He goes on with the enumeration of the signs of sorrow, as if he had been a friend, a brother to me. I went, walking slowly, like a man absorbed in sorrow, as one who laments a mother. In mourning garments are bowed down, walking with a weary, heavy stoop, like one crushed a mother's death, with the garb of woe, thus faithfully and he loved, and truly wept for the noble ruined soul which, blinded by passion and poisoned by lies, had turned to be his enemy, and then same love clung by him to the last, as it ever does with great and good men who learn God to suffer long and be kind, to bear all things and hope all things. Of these Psalms, the 22nd is remarkable. In it, David's personal experience seems to afford only the starting point from the purely messianic prophecy, which embraces many particulars that far transcend anything recorded of his sorrows. The impossibility of finding occurrence in his life corresponding to such traits as tortured limbs and burning thirst, pierced hands and parted garments, had driven some critic to the hypothesis that we have here a psalm of the exile, describing either actual suffering inflicted on some unknown confessor in Babylon, or in figurative language, the climate is Israel there. But the Davidic origin is confirmed by many obvious points of resemblance with the songs which are indisputably his, and especially with those of the Saulian period, while the difficulty of finding historical facts answering to the emphatic language is invaded, not met by either assuming that such facts existed in some life which has left no trace, or by forcing a metaphorical sense on words which sound wonderfully like the sign language of real sufferer. Of course, if we believe that prediction is an absurdity, any difficulty will be lighter than the acknowledgement that we have prediction here. But unless we have a foregone conclusion and then sword to blind us, we shall see in this psalm a clear example of the prophecy of a suffering Messiah. In most of the other psalms where David spoke of his sorrows were only a typical foreshadowing of Christ, but in this, and in such others as 64 and
69, and that's 109.
109. Okay,
Yep.
Sorry. If these are David's, we have type changing into prophecy, and the person and the psalmist fading away before the image which, by occasion of his own grace, rose vast and solemn and distant before his prophetic gaze. Before his prophet gaze, the image of one who should be perfectly all which he was in partial measure, the anointed of God, the entourage of his name, to his brethren, the King of Israel, and whose pass to his dominions. 22:2. So we're going to read Psalm 22, I guess.
Okay.
Whose pass to dominion should be sickly shorn with solitary sorrow, and reproach, and agony, and whose far more exceeding weight of woe all his affliction was light as a feather, and transitory as a moment. And when the psalmist had learned that the lesson, beside all the other trust, the patience which his wanderings taught him, his schooling was nearly over, he was almost ready for the new display, and the slowly evolving revelation God's purposes, which by his sorrows and unfolded more distinctly than before the sufferings of the Messiah, was ripening for the unveiling in his kinghood of the glory that should follow. Is that amazing song? Or description is others wonderful answer. Read Psalm 22 for us time.
For the director of music, to the tune of The Doe of the Morning, Psalm of David. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by everyone, despised by the people. All who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls surround me. Strong bulls of Bashan encircle me. Roaring lions that tear their prey open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It is melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd. and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me, a pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of lions. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will declare your name to my people. In the assembly I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. Revere him, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. From you comes the theme of my praise in the great assembly. Before those who fear you, I will fulfill my vows. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord, and all the families of the nations will bow down before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him, those who cannot keep themselves alive. Posterity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it.
Isn't that amazing? The people yet unborn.